Thanks so much for tuning in to the very first episode of Don't Turn Around Scary Stories. I appreciate you being here and would love you to like the video if you enjoy it. And if you're new to Don't Turn Around, please subscribe for new scary stories. What's about to follow are 13 last day of school creepy stories from college, middle school, high schools, and even elementary. Let me know what you think in the comments. The cafeteria buzz was louder than usual, thanks to Ryland's big mouth echoing off the linoleum floors. He had this crazy look in his eyes as he climbed onto a table, like Caesar about to address Rome, except it was just a bunch of middle schoolers trying to eat their pizza without getting heartburn. But when the school bully stands on furniture, it's not a joke, it's a proclamation. "Listen up," he bellowed, and even the lunch ladies paused. "I know how to hypnotize people, and you're all my puppets," he said in an evil fashion. Nobody laughed. Ryland was the kind of kid who'd give you a swirly for looking at him wrong. Just this morning he said he'd punch me, Derek, and Lucy in the face if we didn't comply with his plan. "You," he pointed to Lucy. "Duck." Suddenly Lucy quacked like a duck. "You," he pointed to Derek. "Your trigger word is homework." Derek started to meow like a cat. Everyone was stunned. Ryland snarled and said, "I know all your trigger words. I can make everyone here do anything I say." For further proof, he looked directly at me. "You," he pointed, his bony finger in my face. Earlier, Ryland had cornered me before lunch, his breath hot and stinking of stale chips. "You're gonna do exactly what I say or you're dead," he hissed. I nodded, feeling knots in my stomach, knowing he meant every word. So when he pointed at me, singling me out of the crowd, I knew I had no choice. "Sing," he ordered, commanding me with a nasty grin. And as my voice cracked out the first lines of the national anthem, my cheeks burning, I saw fear in the eyes around me. They all believed he had hypnotized us, and that they could be next. Ryland jumped down, chest puffed out. "When the last bell rings, it's game on. That's how everyone here is triggered. It's going to be a purge, school style. You don't want to get hit? Strike first." With that, he walked away, leaving everyone terrified. The rest of the day, the rumors spread like wildfire. You could feel the tension, thick and heavy. Whispers filled every corner of the hallways, kids forming silent alliances. The closer we got to the final bell, the crazier things seemed. Everyone really thought there was going to be a purge, just like the movie. Some were scared, some were skeptical, but others were talking about how to take others out. A group said they were going to strangle Joanna. Another boy said he'd crush someone's head in his desk. The air was electric, charged with fear and uncertainty. It was like the school was holding its breath, waiting for something to shatter the silence. In art, some of my classmates started making masks. They were arming themselves with sharp pencils, compasses, anything they could find that would do severe damage. Someone broke a mirror in the bathroom and wrapped up a shard of glass to use as a knife. The hockey team didn't return their hockey sticks, but brought them to class. Everyone talked about striking first, so you knew when the final bell rang, it was go time. You'd either kill or be a victim. I couldn't take it. This prank, this lie, was going too far. I slipped out of the mayhem and found my way to the principal's office, my heart racing with every step. I told her everything. The principal's eyes narrowed as I spoke, her lips pressed into a thin line. She thanked me, and I could see the gears turning in her head as she picked up the phone and quietly made a call. The end-of-day bell never rang. Instead, Mrs. Weber, the principal, came on the PA system. Her voice was calm, but you could hear the steel behind her words. "Attention students, please remain in your classrooms until further notice. We have a situation that we're handling." The collective sigh of relief was almost as loud as the bell itself. The tension deflated, kids laughing nervously at the absurdity of it all. As we were dismissed by classroom, I saw Ryland being escorted to the office, his head hanging low, that cocky swagger gone. Police turned up as we all left, and there wasn't a purge. The scary thing is, in group chats, Ryland boasted he has something bigger and better planned for next year. No one knows what. I do know, however, I'm not looking forward to 8th grade. The sky was a mess of angry clouds, all dark and twisted up like a bad dream. I pressed my forehead against the window of the school bus, watching raindrops race each other down the glass. Lightning zigzagged through the sky, and I counted the seconds until the thunder boomed, shaking the bus a little. It was the last day of school, and my last ride home. Mrs. Kinney, our bus driver, was saying something about how it was just a little storm, but her voice sounded higher than usual, like she didn't believe what she was telling us. The bus was loud, everyone's voices bouncing around the walls as we told stories and tried to scare each other with tales of lightning striking. But I wasn't really listening. I was watching the trees bending like they were about to snap, and the way the lightning kept lighting up the whole sky. Suddenly, the bus jolted and Mrs. Kinney gasped, her hands clutching her chest. I'll never forget the way her eyes looked, all wide and scared, before they just closed. The bus started to swerve, and everyone went silent, like we were all holding our breath. "Mrs. Kinney?" someone shouted, but she didn't answer. She just slumped over, and that's when the screaming started. The bus hit the side of the bridge, and everything went crazy. Bags were flying, kids were shouting, and I felt like I was inside one of those snow globes, only it was full of fear and thunder. I remember the bus tipping, the world turning sideways, and then this awful crashing sound as we hit the water. Kids were crying, shouting for help, for their moms and dads, for anyone. I couldn't see right. My glasses were gone, but I remembered something from a TV show about how you've got to break a window to get out. I scrambled toward the front, my heart hammering so loud I barely heard the water gurgling as it filled up the bus. I knew there were metal bars under the driver's head seat rest. Dad had taught me that when I was really young. I yanked them out, my hands slipping and sliding until I got a good grip. I smashed the window, and it felt like the whole world was holding its breath for a second before the water rushed in, angry and cold. We clambered out the window, one by one, like we were being born into this stormy world all over again. I looked back just in time to see the bus, our big yellow bus, disappear beneath the water like some giant metal coffin. We huddled together on the shore, rain pouring down, thunder still grumbling above us. We were a mess of wet uniforms and scared wide eyes. I couldn't stop shaking, couldn't stop thinking about the bus, all quiet and dark under the water. We stood there in the rain, a bunch of us kids from the bus, but not all. Some were missing, just gone, like whispers that you think you hear, but then turn around and there's no one there. We didn't talk about it, but we all knew. The storm had taken more than just our breaths away. It had taken friends we'd laughed with just this morning. The rain was letting up, but it felt like it was still pouring inside me, a sad kind of shower that wouldn't stop. We huddled closer, none of us wanting to say it out loud, but the silence said it for us. Some seats on the bus would be empty tomorrow. It was a heavy feeling, like carrying a backpack filled with stones instead of books. Rescue lights flashed in the distance, coming closer, and I knew they'd be asking us questions, wanting to know what happened. But all I could think about was how this was supposed to be a normal ride home, how I'd been planning to play video games or maybe watch a movie. Instead, I was trying to remember the last things we'd all said to each other, wishing we'd known which words to choose if we'd known they'd be our last. Man, we thought we were so clever. Mr. Blakely, the history teacher with a voice like sandpaper and a stare that could drill through steel, was the perfect target for a senior prank. No one liked the guy. He was tough on grading and had zero chill. So when we slipped that fake lottery ticket onto his desk, saying he'd won a cool $100,000, we were all snickering, imagining him getting all excited over nothing. When class started, there it was, sitting under a pile of quizzes like a ticking time bomb. We'd left a note saying, "Hope you get lucky on the last day of school." Then he took out a quarter and started scratching. Every ticket was guaranteed to win $100,000, but of course, it's fake. You'd know this if you read the small print. He didn't get his win at first, but then, man, when he did, his face lit up like a kid on Christmas. He stood up so fast his chair nearly toppled. "Class," his voice boomed, joy crackling through the usual gruff. Today is the best day ever. Pack up, go home, celebrate. School's out on me. There were cheers, sure, but I caught a weird vibe. I bit my lip to stop the smirk. This is my last day teaching, he said. I have to admit, I've hated it. Then he went to the class phone and dialed. Principal Unger, I quit. Yeah, you're the worst principal I've ever known. I'm done. I resign. He slammed the phone down, a grin plastered over his face. Free at last, he beamed. The class was silent. Then a buzz started, everyone whispering, the energy weird and wild. But then it hit me like a punch to the gut. This wasn't right. I blurted out, my voice shaking. The ticket! It's fake, Mr. Blakely! He froze, the smile fading, the quarter dropping. What did you say? His voice was this thin thread of sound. The classroom was a graveyard then. Someone snorted a laugh, but it hung there, cruel and twisted. Mr. Blakely looked at the ticket, then at us, and his face crumbled. Tears, real, actual tears, started streaming down his cheeks. This tower of strict rules and deadlines just broke down in front of 30 kids. We never expected that. We never wanted that. It was supposed to be a laugh, not this meltdown of a man who I guess had nothing else going for him. It was supposed to be a dumb prank. Instead, we broke Mr. Blakely. He just stood there for a second that felt like forever, his eyes glazing over the phony ticket. Then something snapped. His hand shot out, crashing into the globe he always polished, the one that spun stories of ancient battles and world empires. It smashed against the wall, continents shattering, oceans splintering into shards that skittered across the floor like lost dreams. The room erupted in gasps, chairs screeching back. This was the globe Mr. Blakely loved, the one he'd spin and point to whenever he talked about the wars and wonders of history. Now it was just a heap of plastic and mess on the classroom floor. He turned slowly, fists clenched, face red and twisted with something that looked like rage or pain, or both mashed up together. You think this is funny? He bellowed, his voice bouncing off the walls. You think you can just mess with people's lives? Tommy stood up, said something about needing to get out, but Mr. Blakely was faster. He moved like I'd never seen before, all that anger giving him some sort of scary speed. He slammed the door shut, locking it in one swift motion. Nobody's leaving, he hissed, leaning back against the door. His chest was heaving, eyes wild and darting from face to face. We were trapped, the air in the room tight and sharp as a knife edge. Every one of us was silent. Blakely's eyes, man, they were something else, just dead and dark. He was pacing like a wild thing, cornered and desperate. You lot think you're smart, huh? He spat out, his voice a low rumble. If any of you try to leave, you'll regret it. His hand hovered over his desk drawer, where he had always joked he kept a gun. He opened it, then stared intensely at us. We were statues, barely breathing. I was sure he had a gun in his desk, and was seconds away from using it. Suddenly, the door clicked open. The principal, Ms. Unger, just waltzed in like it was any normal day. We didn't have time to warn her. Blakely lunged for the drawer, and the room exploded into chaos. Chairs overturning, people screaming, diving for cover. I yelled, "Get down!" But Mrs. Unger just stood there, calm as you please. And then, would you believe it, she chuckled. Not scared, not worried, just amused. And Blakely, the guy we thought had lost it, he started cracking up too. Turns out the desk drawer was empty. No gun, nothing. You should have seen your faces, Mr. Blakely laughed, slapping his knee like our reaction was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. Mrs. Ungar then turned to us. You all think you're the prank kings and queens? Please, you're just amateurs, she said. We just sat there, a bunch of shocked and sheepish kids, not sure if we should laugh or cry. Both were accustomed to senior pranks, and had truly schooled us on our last day. The static from the PA system was the first thing I noticed when I punched in for what I figured would be an easy gig. substitute security guard on the last day of school. Kids would be hyper, sure, but I thought the biggest issue I'd face would be breaking up a food fight or catching some senior trying to pull a prank. I barely got my bearings when the principal's voice crackled through the speakers, her usual end-of-year speech about summer safety tips and well wishes. And remember, students, to always... Her voice cut off so sharply it made my head snap up. There was a shuffling, a chair scraping against the floor, and the principal's voice trembled. Please, think about what you're... A harsh, cold laugh cut her off, and the man's voice replaced hers, thick with anger, and something worse, unhinged.
Shut your goddamn mouth. You're gonna regret firing me.
That's when I knew. The voice belonged to someone who had nothing left to lose. A man's voice, rough like gravel being churned up by tires, growled through the system.
You all think you can fire me just like that?
My heart hit the floor, and I was moving before I even thought about what I was doing. The halls were chaos, a stampede of kids and teachers, the panic almost tangible. No need for an evacuation order. They were already on it. I pushed through the swarm, every shout and cry from the speaker stirring me on. Stay calm! Everyone head to the nearest exit! I found myself shouting, trying to sound like I had any control over the situation. Reaching the principal's office was like swimming upstream, my uniform useless against the tide of bodies. When I finally made it, the door was ajar, sobbing and desperate cries of help still streaming from the PA system. There were others there, teachers and a couple of kids, who looked like they should be anywhere but here. My hands were steady, though, trained for moments like this, even if I'd never really believed I'd face one. Get back, I ordered, my voice more gruff than I intended. They scattered, just as the principal's voice came again, pleading now, begging. I didn't think. I acted. One shot. The room beyond the door exploded into a frenzy of screams and the thud of a body hitting the ground. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. The aftermath was a blur. Cops and ambulances, a sea of uniforms. I gave my statement with hands that didn't feel like mine, the weight of the gun in my holster an unfamiliar heaviness. I was hailed a hero, but the title sat uneasy on my shoulders, as heavy as the silence that had filled the principal's office. I couldn't shake the image of the man on the floor, the teachers and students with wide, shocked eyes, the feel of the trigger under my finger. It was supposed to be a simple day. Last day of school, a substitute gig, easy money. Instead, I was part of a story that would be told in hushed, disbelieving whispers for years to come. So summer was knocking, and I was totally ready to kick the door down to answer it. Dumping my algebra book in my locker for the last time felt like dropping weights off my shoulders. Literally. The halls of Washington High were buzzing like a released balloon flying around a room, everyone hyped up for the last day of school chaos. Zoe popped up beside me, her energy levels basically breaking the sound barrier. Maya, are you coming to London's Rager? It's gonna be epic. I was about to give her a heck yes when the fire alarm cut in, shrieking its head off. There's a drill on the last day? Cue the collective eye roll. But as we strolled out, expecting the all clear any second, things took a serious nosedive. Mr. Hargrove was out there, his face all kinds of pale, shouting over the noise. Get back in! This is not a drill! Talk about a vibe check. We hustled back inside, and I couldn't help but notice through the windows two guys in ski masks bolting from the direction of First National Bank, their arms loaded with bags that screamed money inside. Then they were yanking our school doors open, and it hit me like a slap of ice water. This was no drill. The fun, floaty bubble of last day freedom popped, real quick. Mrs. Keller corralled us into her room, flicking off the lights and telling us to hit the deck. I was crouched down, trying to squash the panic, when I heard the pops. I was looking out into the hallway. Alex, who's never without his phone, was low-key filming when 2 shots rang out. He dropped, and his phone smashed onto the floor. Mr. Jacobs tried to be the real-deal hero, But another pop stopped him mid-stride. His kindness stained the floor in a way I'll never unsee. The room was chaos muffled by fear, soft whimpers and stifled sobs. Nobody moved to the windows anymore. Nobody dared. The men in masks had made their presence undeniable, the sounds of their heavy boots a macabre drumbeat in the hallways of our school. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to move, crawling to Mr. Jacobs's side. I ripped off my jacket, pressing it against the wound, trying to remember the steps from the first aid video we'd watched in health class. "Hold on, Mr. Jacobs," I whispered, more to myself than to him. "Just hold on." His hand found mine, grip weak but there. As the sirens grew louder, hope kindled within me. I clung to it, using it to stoke the bravery that I didn't know I had. Mr. Jacobs's hand squeezed mine once more before going limp, and I knew we were on our own. In the distance, the sound of a bullhorn filtered through the chaos. The police negotiating. Maybe, just maybe, this summer would still be there for us. Maybe we'd get to dive into pools instead of hiding from bullets, slather on sunscreen instead of pressing down on wounds. But as I held Mr. Jacobs's hand, feeling the life fade from it, I knew one thing for certain. We were all leaving a piece of our innocence behind in Mrs. Keller's history class, amongst the scattered chairs and the smell of gunpowder and fear. There was this massive crash as doors flew open and SWAT guys rushed in, their heavy boots thundering against the floor. The gunshots were so loud, I swear my ears were ringing. It was like a horror movie. There was so much blood spraying. Both the robbers barely got a second before they were hit by a ton of bullets and dropped like sacks of bricks. I didn't even realize I was running until I was halfway to the door, racing for the outside like it was the last chopper out of a war zone. I burst out into the daylight. I collapsed onto the grass, all shaky and covered in, stuff from inside. Sirens were blaring. People were shouting. And I just lay there, staring up at the sky, knowing nothing would be the same again. I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me, sticky as the gum clinging to the underside of the chemistry lab table. I laughed it off, telling myself that the last day of high school was making me paranoid. But as I slung my backpack over my shoulder and caught my reflection in the trophy case, I couldn't help scanning the busy hallway behind me. No one seemed out of place, yet the tingle at the back of my neck persisted. For a few days now, I keep getting these strange hang-ups. Someone keeps calling me. But then when I answer, I just hear heavy breathing. It's an unknown number, so I can't trace it. John caught up with me, his grin a beacon of normalcy. "Yo, ready for a summer of nothing but sun and beach?" "Definitely," I said, trying to match his enthusiasm. But the weight of unseen eyes pressed down on me, heavy as the summer humidity. That's when my phone buzzed, slicing through the hum of chatter. A new message from an unknown number. I swiped open my phone to a photo of me from this morning getting off the school bus. It had to be a prank. "Hey, look at this," I said, showing John the photo. "Weird, right?" John's eyebrows knitted together, but he laughed it off. The next ping came just after third period. This time the photo was closer, just John and me at our lockers, his hand on my shoulder, both of us peering at something on his phone. "Seriously, you have a stalker?" There was a cold sweat on my palms when I typed, "Who are you?" The reply was almost instant. "Your biggest fan." Chills danced down my arms. This wasn't just someone messing with us. They were following. Every snap of their camera was a whisper. "I'm here. I'm watching." And the worst part? I had no clue who it could be. All I knew was they had a fixation on me. The school day dragged on like a nightmare in slow motion, each tick of the classroom clock a thudding heartbeat in my chest. In between classes, I went to the bathroom, and I was in the stall when I got another photo. It was from the previous day when I was at lunch, taken from far away like someone had zoomed in. It really creeped me out. When the final bell rang, the relief that should have flooded through me was strangled by fear. John and I planned to meet by the gym, his favorite hangout spot. The place was nearly deserted now, just the echo of a bouncing basketball from someone shooting hoops unseen. I pulled out my phone to check the time, but there it was again. A new message. A picture of us, standing by the gym doors just seconds ago. The angle was odd, like it was taken from above. I looked up and around frantically. Then came another ping. "You're so hot," the message said. I knew he was watching me. I scanned the windows above, and that's when I saw him. A silhouette framed against the fading light, a hood over his head. Without thinking, I waved, a sarcastic, trembling gesture. The figure didn't wave back, didn't move at all, just stood there, watching, until it turned and disappeared into the darkening school. My phone felt like a brick of ice in my hand. The messages, the photos. With John by my side, we ran into the school and up the stairwell. No one passed us, so whoever it was probably still inside the chemistry class. We burst in, but no one was there. As I'm standing confused, a side door opens. It was Mr. Hudson, our chemistry teacher. He asked what we were doing, and we told him. He assured us no one was in there apart from him. I left the school, perplexed. I got another message on my way home saying, "I really like you." I don't know who it is for sure, but I have my suspicions. John thinks I'm crazy and that it's just another student playing a prank. Me? I don't think I'll be taking chemistry next year. So, there I am, right? Feet dragging to the middle school where I teach, still wiping sleep from my eyes. Then, out of nowhere, this car. I'm talking some shiny black blur, just guns it past the stopped bus. Horns are blaring, tires screech, but it's like everything goes in slow-mo for a sec. I see this mom, just stepped off the curb, frozen like a deer in headlights. She doesn't stand a chance. That car smacks into her, sends her flying, and I hear this thud. It's a sound you don't forget. Kids are screaming. I'm herding them back inside, away from the chaos, my heart pounding out of my chest. The scene outside is pure mayhem. There's this thick, tense air as we're waiting for the ambulance, feeling like time's got no regard for us anymore. This mom, she's laying there, right? And she's conscious, which I can't even fathom. She's whispering about her kids, tears streaming down, and man, it's a mess. She's saying these goodbyes, and I'm just there, feeling useless, while the kids inside are peeking through windows, scared out of their minds. It's this endless 10 minutes. And when the sirens finally cut through the silence, it's a relief. But it's too late. She's gone. Just like that. A stillness sets in that's downright eerie. The whole day at school, it's like we're sitting on pins and needles, as no one knows which kid has lost their parent. School's out, and I get the gut-wrenching job of hanging back, watching as the lucky kids get scooped up one by one. Half an hour of pickups, and there are only two left, a boy and a girl. Finally, a dad comes running, takes the boy. The girl looks around sheepishly for her mom. She's got these big, sad eyes, and it hits me like a punch to the gut. She looks just like the mom who, God, she's the spitting image. And my mind's playing this cruel game of deja vu, replaying that morning's disaster on a loop. I can't shake the image of the mom, her life flickering out on the asphalt, the warmth in her eyes dimming as she spoke of her family. She's sitting on a statue. Her feet dangle off the curb, kicking at nothing, waiting for a mom who I know won't show. I'm watching her, and it's like I can feel the weight of the secret I'm holding, heavy as lead in my gut. It's my job to tell her what happened, but I can't do it. Time's crawling, man. The sun's getting lower. Eventually, I go over to her, my heart doing that weird shaky thing, like when you've had too much coffee. I'm trying to figure out how to break her world. "Hey, kiddo, you need to call your mom?" I ask, even though I know. She nods, and there's this tremor in her lips, a quiver that says she's trying so hard to be brave. I take her inside. I kneel down beside her, bringing myself to her level. Break the news. Your mom, she's in heaven. Her world's shattered. Her eyes, they just kill me. They fill up, but she's holding it together, this brave little soldier in pigtails. We're standing in the empty hallway, her hand all small and trusting in mine. And then her real mom comes through the door. I'm so confused. "Mommy, you're back from heaven," she yells out, happy. I can't even speak. There she is, not a scratch on her. And I've never been so glad to be wrong. Turns out the lady who got hit was another teacher here on a job interview. This little girl's mom's fine, but somewhere out there's a classroom that's going to have a sub tomorrow, and the next day, and who knows how long after that. The mom wasn't happy I told the girl she was in heaven, but thank God she came back. Dude, it was supposed to be epic. Like the most epic last day of 8th grade anyone could have dreamed of. We thought we had it all figured out, you know? To honor Chris, who had been in a wheelchair and got bullied so bad, he just couldn't take it anymore. Nobody even knew how bad it was until he wasn't there anymore. It sucked, and we all felt like crap for not seeing it. So I had this idea. What if, on the last day, we all showed up in wheelchairs? To show, I don't know, that we saw him, finally. It was my way of saying sorry to Chris. Getting the wheelchairs wasn't easy. We scoured garage sales, thrift stores, and some of us even sweet-talked the nurses at the local hospital to lend us some of their old ones. My buddy Kyle found two just rusting in his grandma's shed. By the time the last day rolled around, everyone in our year said they had one. The morning was chaotic, but kind of amazing. Seeing everyone rolling in, struggling, and laughing at how hard it was to maneuver these things. We filled the hallways, and it was like a weird kind of festival on wheels. But then, the first bell rang, and we all had to actually get to class. That's when it got real. There's only one elevator in our old school, and man, it's slow. Like, could take all day slow. The hallways got jam-packed real quick. Everyone was trying to be chill, waiting their turn. But you could see the panic start to bubble up as people realized they might not make it to class on time. Some started pushing, trying to get ahead, and the whole thing turned into a mess. That's when I heard the shouting. I was stuck near the back, just outside the stairwell. The shoving got worse, and suddenly, there's this loud, super scary scream. Everyone froze. Someone had fallen down the stairs. It was Mike, one of the bigger dudes, who'd been right on the edge, trying to make room. It got real quiet. Everyone was freaked out, staring at the stairwell, too scared to move. The teachers came running, and it was like all the air got sucked out of the building. Mike was alive, barely. He was rushed to the hospital, and the whispers started as soon as he was out the door. They said his back was messed up bad, like he might never walk again bad. The rest of the day, nobody talked much. We went through the motions, attended an assembly where some teachers tried to say nice things about unity and strength, but it all felt hollow. We were supposed to make a statement, not send one of our own to the hospital. When the final bell rang and we all rolled out, nobody felt like celebrating. We just wanted to go home, forget about the day. But we couldn't. Not really. We'd set out to honor Chris. But all we did was mess up. Big time. And now, next year, Mike's going to be the one in the wheelchair for real. No more pretending. No more games. The halls will still be too narrow, the elevator too slow. And we'll all know every single day that we didn't just fail Chris. We failed Mike, too. And that creepy, scary feeling, it's guilt, and it's sticking around, rolling through every hallway in our minds forever. The last day of school. It was the worst day of my life. The buzz was that some seniors planned to do a smoke-out prank. Basically, they were going to pop smoke bombs to fill up a room with smoke. It's just to mess with people and snag a few laughs. Everyone thought it was going to go down in a classroom during the last period. Cut to later that day, I needed a break from the noise and slipped into the bathroom. Sitting there in the stall, I was just zoning out, reading the usual nonsense scribbled on the door. Stuff like, Tommy Hart's Jessica forever and for a good time call. Suddenly, mid-snicker at a particularly dumb joke, the air turned foggy. Confused, I realized it was smoke pouring in under the stall door. My first thought was, crap, the smokeout's happening here. The bathroom was filling up fast with thick smoke, and I could barely see or breathe. I heard coughing from another stall. It hit me then. Someone else was trapped in here, too. I stumbled out, my lungs burning, eyes watering like crazy. There, slumped against the wall, was this freshman kid, wheezing and clutching his chest. Between gasps, he choked out, "I have asthma. Please help me." Panic kicked in. I yanked at the door. Locked. Freaking seniors had locked us in as part of their dumb prank. I started pounding on the door, shouting for help, but the alarm was blaring so loud no one could hear us. The smoke swirled around us like some kind of living thing, thick and hungry, swallowing up every bit of clean air. I could barely see, and every breath was like inhaling fire. The freshman was panicking, his face white as paper, his breaths coming out in ragged sobs. We stumbled to the back of the bathroom where I half remembered there might be a maintenance hatch or something. "We'll get out through the vents," I said, but when we got there, I couldn't see a thing. The smoke was getting denser, every second stealing our oxygen. The kid was gasping, clawing at his throat. "Help!" I screamed, my voice ripping at the edges. "Somebody, please!" But the only answer was the echoing wail of the fire alarm, drowning us out. This was all going wrong, so very wrong. I slammed my fists against the door, but it was like hitting a brick wall. He collapsed onto the floor. His body convulsed, a desperate fight for air that wasn't coming. The sounds were gut-wrenching, the gurgles and gasps of someone drowning with no water in sight. His fingers scratched at the floor, leaving eerie, screeching echoes in the smoky tomb. His eyes met mine, a silent plea for help I couldn't give, and something in them flickered and went out, like the last ember of a candle snuffed by the wind. I just kind of collapsed, Right there on the floor next to the freshman. The world outside the door might as well have been a million miles away. I lay there, trying to keep my breath shallow, trying not to breathe in the poison around me. I could feel my head getting all fuzzy, like when you stand up too fast. But I kept thinking, stay awake, man, stay awake. But it was like trying to hold on to a handful of water. Pointless. My eyelids got heavier, and that buzzing fear in my brain started to fade out. I remember thinking this was it. I was going to end up like the freshman. Next thing I knew, I felt this jolt, like being woken up. There were arms around me, lifting me up. Strong arms, not like my shaky ones. I blinked my eyes open, and through the tears and the blurriness, I saw the outline of a firefighter's mask. I was moving, floating almost. He was carrying me out, away from the smoke, away from the horror. I wanted to tell him about the freshman, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was hang on as the fresh air hit me and the real world started to creep back in. That day messed me up real bad. It was supposed to be about goodbyes for summer, not goodbyes forever. I survived somehow when it felt like I wouldn't. They said it was because I was bigger, had more in me to fight the smoke, but that sounded like a crappy consolation prize. I kept thinking about the freshman, how he didn't make it. Luck shouldn't decide stuff like that. It wasn't fair. He was just a kid, and now he'd never get to worry about finals or prom or any of that normal high school junk. I got to go home and hug my family. But him? All because of a stupid prank, he didn't get that chance. And that's something I've got to carry with me forever. The whole campus was talking about the murder, like it was some messed up episode of a true crime podcast. Only it was real life, and it went down right here. A girl I didn't know, a freshman just like me, got stabbed. The all-gender bathroom of the second floor was the scene. I'm stuck in our trash dorm room, cleaning up solo because my roommates bailed quick after what happened. No one wanted to stick around, and honestly, I didn't blame them. Digging through the disaster zone we called a living space, I almost gagged on this stench, like rusted iron mixed with something rotting, and it was coming from the trash bin that was practically part of the furniture. I reached in, trying not to think about it, and my hand hit something colder than the rest of the garbage. Pulling out a knife, my heart slammed into overdrive. The blade was caked in dry, brownish gunk. Blood. My brain screamed murder weapon, and my gut knotted up. The murder had happened on Saturday night. She had been stabbed brutally, and all classes were subsequently canceled. There I was, holding the murder weapon. Freaking fantastic. With my prints all over it. It was like I was begging to be the prime suspect. I was the lonely loser playing video games in my room. No alibi, just bad luck. Truth is, the cops and I, we've got history, not the good kind. Been on the wrong side of a few misunderstandings. Like when they pinned the stolen laptops on me because I fit some vague description. Took weeks to clear that mess up. So you can bet when I found that knife, every cell in my body wanted to bolt. But that same gut feeling was like a neon sign flashing. They won't believe you. The idea of hiding the damn thing felt like swallowing glass. All sharp edges and bitter aftertaste. But there I was, wiping it clean. Feeling every hope I had for a normal college life melting away like wax down the side of a candle. It was either hide it or get dragged through the mud again. Only this time, this was the big leagues, murder. So yeah, I was scared. Scared enough to play janitor to a crime scene, scrubbing away evidence like I was scrubbing away my own future. The weight of that knife was heavier than any textbook I'd lugged across campus, and I dumped it back into the trash with a kind of desperation I didn't even want to unpack. After ditching it back in the bin, the room felt like it was closing in on me. Every creak and whisper was a shout. I'd be crashing here next year, wondering if I was living with a murderer. How's that for a roommate selection lottery? So I waited for the door to bust open, for the cops to come. But it was just me, my heartbeat, and the dark, knowing that when I did close my eyes, I'd be seeing that blood, that knife, and feeling like the Grim Reaper was my new bunk buddy. Next year. I'm not looking forward to it, knowing I'll be sleeping next to a murderer. I don't know which of my roomies it is, but I can't say anything to anyone. All I know is I'll sleep with my eyes half open. I've been a school librarian for the past 13 years. The corridors were quieter than usual, the frenetic energy of the last day tinged with an underlying hush. As I made my way from class to class, cart in tow, collecting library books. Most kids returned their books with the distracted haste of those eager to start their summer adventures, barely pausing to say goodbye. But there was an order to this chaos, a final ritual before the doors closed on another school year. By the time I reached the last classroom, a peculiar silence greeted me. I pulled out the list, my finger tracking down the names as I called out the overdue titles. The first on the list was called Never Return. I looked up briefly to see if the book got returned, but everyone was still, waiting for my next request. From the Silent Woods, I continued. Nope. No one responded. That was 2 letters I'd have to email parents so far. How about Where Shadows Whisper? Again, no one moved. How about Goodbyes Unheard? My eyes glanced up, hoping someone was going to step forward. Nope. It was then a girl raised her hand, her face pale as the pages of the books she surrounded herself with. They're all gone, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The kids who checked out those books. They never came to school today. The room was suffocated by a silence so dense it felt almost solid. They're never coming back. Ever, the little girl said, her eyes bulging. She continued speaking. The woods reached out and took them. I looked at her confused. She pointed to the list in my hand. They gave you the message, she said calmly. You're just not hearing it. Never return from the silent woods where shadows whisper goodbyes unheard. Wait. What? I looked at the list of the book titles and repeated them together. Never return from the silent woods where shadows whisper goodbyes unheard. As the bell rang out, the woods beyond the school, once a place of play and laughter, now loomed with an eerie stillness, guarding their secrets as they had for years. Secrets that the children, now absent, might have stumbled upon, never to return. In the sweltering heat of the school kitchen, the clatter of pots and pans was like an aggressive percussion, underscoring my simmering resentment. The complaints about the food had become a relentless drumbeat, each one chipping away at my patience. The kids' sneers and turned-up noses had long since soured the joy I once took in preparing their meals. I counted the minutes until summer, when I could finally be free of their ingratitude. That's when I saw it. A rat, its sleek, filthy body skittering across the countertop. Disgust surged through me, matched only by a fierce, twisted delight in the chase. Cornered, it made a desperate leap, but only found its demise as it plummeted into a vat of boiling broth. Its frantic thrashing was a grotesque dance of death. It clanged against the sides, a desperate attempt at survival that grated on my already frayed nerves. In a moment clouded by a cocktail of revulsion and rage, I reached for the rat poison. With a grimace that was almost a smile, I sprinkled the white powder into the pot, watching as the thrashing slowed, then ceased. The broth continued to bubble, but before I could retrieve the now still carcass from the stew, my supervisor burst in, her voice a razor-sharp reprimand for imagined slights and shortcomings. With no chance to dispose of the evidence, and her gaze slicing through the room, I diced the rat, stirred it into the day's special, and masked its presence under a heavy layer of spices. The lunch bell rang, and the monsters, they were little better than that, poured in, hungry and oblivious. They filled their plates, and to my disbelief, they relished every bite. Praise for once echoed in the cafeteria, a macabre twist that soured my stomach. But the triumph was short-lived. As the clock's hands swept forward, a symphony of discomfort crescendoed. One by one, children clutched their bellies, their faces contorting in agony. The noise rose, a cacophony of retches and cries of pain as more and more doubled over. The air turned foul, the stench of vomit mingling with the lingering aroma of lunch. And there I stood amidst the chaos, an island of calm in the storm. A part of me knew I had fed them poison, yet I felt detached. My emotions a distant thing as I watched the nightmare unfold. With every wail and convulsion, I thought of the sneers, the disdain, and something within me, something dark, didn't regret it. As the emergency services swarmed in and the horror of what had occurred began to dawn on the staff, I slipped quietly away from the commotion. They would find out, of course, they always do. But in that moment, I was just the lunch lady, invisible and forgotten. My dark deeds swallowed up by the panic of the last day of school gone horribly, irreversibly wrong. It was the last day of elementary school. The volunteer parent organizer had sent a desperate last-minute call for help. They were short on volunteers for the end-of-year party. That's how I found myself manning the refreshment table, handing out juice boxes and cookies to a swarm of overexcited third graders. A couple I hadn't seen before showed up to help, introducing themselves with confident smiles and hearty handshakes. They wore the standard volunteer stickers, but what caught my eye was the man's attire, dressed like a magician, complete with a dark, velvety coat and a top hat, which seemed overly theatrical for a school event. He started doing simple magic tricks for the kids, pulling coins from behind ears and making colorful scarves disappear. The children were delighted, at least until one of his tricks, a seemingly innocent gesture to make a bouquet of flowers appear, startled a little girl named Emma. She stumbled backwards, tripping over her own feet, and started crying from the sudden fall and fright. The magician's partner, introduced earlier as Nancy, immediately scooped Emma up, offering soothing words and saying she'd take her to the nurse's office. It seemed like a routine accident, nothing more. Time slipped by as the party continued. I suddenly realized it had been quite a while since Nancy had taken Emma to the nurse. Concern nudged me to check on them, so I excused myself and headed to the nurse's office. To my surprise, the nurse was there alone, organizing her desk. She looked up, puzzled, when I asked about the little girl and Nancy. "No one's come in here with any injuries today," she said, her brow furrowing. Confused, I checked the restrooms and other likely places, but there was no sign of either of them. My worry deepened. Returning back to the party, I spotted the magician, heading for the exit. It struck me as odd. Why leave when the party was in full swing? He drove off in a black van. Something about the situation felt increasingly wrong. I reported my concerns to the teacher, but she seemed preoccupied with wrapping up the party and dismissed it with a nonchalant shrug. As the event came to a close and kids began leaving with their parents, the crowd was thinning, the noise settling into a low hum of departing voices. That's when I noticed her, a solitary figure cutting through the sea of celebrating families. Her eyes scanning frantically. A knot tightened in my stomach as her voice, strained and sharp, cut through the murmur, calling for Emma. She moved with a kind of disjointed urgency, her motions betraying a growing storm within. As she neared, I caught glimpses of her face, etched with raw fear, the kind that speaks directly to a parent's deepest dread. "Have you seen Emma?" Her voice was a choked whisper, barely carrying over the whispers of the wind. I hesitated, the weight of the story I had to tell pressing down on me. With each word I spoke, recounting the day's unsettling turn of events, I watched her face crumple, a visceral portrayal of a mother's heart fracturing in real time. Without a word, she turned on her heels and stumbled towards the principal's office. Later at home, my husband greeted me with troubling news. Police cars were at the school. He heard that a girl had been kidnapped, and the police were involved. I immediately drove back to the school, my heart pounding with guilt and fear. When I told the officers about Nancy and the magician, their reactions were a mix of shock and grim understanding. It seemed they knew more than they could share at that moment. They asked for every detail I could remember, especially about Nancy and her actions. I recounted the events, still in disbelief over the day's surreal turn. The ordeal cast a shadow over the start of summer. I was relieved my son remained oblivious to the dark undercurrent that had touched his school on what should have been a festive day. As a parent, all I wanted was for him to enjoy his summer, untainted by the reality that his classmate was still out there, missing. It's a strange thing to feel relief amid such a grim situation. But in that moment, all I could think about was protecting his innocence. A few days before school, Emma was located. Well, found in a dumpster, wrapped in bags, her dead fingers holding a yellow plush toy bunny. A plastic bouquet of flowers lay by her side. I think her fall was never accidental, but totally planned, being part of the trick to make her vanish. Forever. There are sick, sick people out there. I pray to God every day me and my family can avoid them. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you too can avoid the evils in the world. And just remember, don't turn around, but do subscribe for more scary stories. See you next time.